First of all, thank you all for coming. I'm very happy to see so many people interested in this topic that I care so much about. I really appreciate your time, especially GDC time, which is really precious time. Thank you, GDC, for giving me this platform on which to speak. It's very important to me and to every Muslim in the world, all 1.6 billion of us. There are two things that I have to tell you. I want to tell you as well, don't worry. So please turn down the volumes on your phones or turn them off. And when you came in, if you weren't scanned, please go and get scanned because we're going to send you a questionnaire. I would really appreciate the feedback if there's anything I could do better. The other last thing is that this talk is subjective. There are a lot of Muslims in the world with a lot of different opinions. I've shown it to a lot of Muslims and I've gotten their feedback, and I think it covers a lot of bases. But if a Muslim tells you otherwise, they're also right. That goes without question. Thank you. So, this is me. My name, well, in sim form, at least. My name is Osama Dorias. I'm a senior game designer at WB Games in Montreal. I'm also the coordinator of the video game programs at Dawson College, and I'm the co-founder and organizer of the Montreal Independent Games Festival, and I do a lot of other things. See, these are some of the games that I've shipped, and what I'm going to be addressing today, because this talk was really long and I had to scale it back a lot because there's a lot of content and it's impossible to talk about everything. So I had to make some hard choices. So I'm going to go very briefly about why positive Muslim representation is important. Then I'm going to debunk a few myths. And there are volumes that could be said about myths about Islam. So I just chose a few select things that I think a lot of people don't know that are relevant to the talk. And then I get into the nitty-gritty, the meat of the talk, which is the how-to guide. At some point, I might lose my voice. It's happened before, so bear with me. What this talk is not about is trying to convince you that not all Muslims are bad. If you believe this, not a problem. Come meet me later. We'll be friends, and hopefully I'll prove you wrong. But I'm not going to address this. I'm going to assume that everybody is here on good faith. And the other is, my intention is not to shame any companies or people who've misrepresented Muslims before. The truth is, I've worked on games that misrepresented Muslims, and I had no choice in the matter. And I tried to make it better, and sometimes it did get better after a little bit of time, and other times not. Everyone's situation is different. I'm not even trying to shame the companies that make the decisions. A lot of times, they just don't know better. The intention behind this talk is that you will know better for the future. That is all. So if I mention your game or a movie or something that you worked on, it's not personal at all. No pointing at people in the audience, please. So let's start with why this is important. Islamophobia is on a rise. After September 11, it was at its highest point. And then it started to die down. Then a few things happened in the States with, political things, and now it's spiked. In the last 2 years, the rate of Islamophobia-related crimes has doubled. And it's unprecedented, and it continues to grow. Most of the time, it happens just on the street. Insults or what have you, attacks. Sometimes it happens in the workplace, and other times it takes the form of bullying in schools. Most of the victims are women, and most of the perpetrators are men. And 10% of the cases are of extreme violence, including death. Where I come from in Canada, our neighboring city, Quebec, just had a shooting last year where 6 Muslims were killed while they were praying. So it is serious. 15% of North American children, and there's a very conservative number, I've heard it go up as much as 50% on occasion, hide their faith. And I know this is true because I used to do the same when I was young, and it wasn't even that bad back then, so I could only imagine how bad it is now for Muslim children. Muslims have a public image problem, and it's sometimes dangerous to be Muslim, so we need help addressing the public image problem. During the American elections in 2016, a few well-intentioned politicians said some things that misrepresented Muslims. Of course, I'm not talking about this gentleman, because everything he says is poop. I am talking about people who should know better. Now, bear with me as I quote them. So I'm going to go in a little, okay, oh, I see it clearer there. If we're to succeed in defeating terrorism, we must enlist Muslim communities as some of our strongest allies, rather than push them away through suspicion and hate. So enlist and allies. We need to be cooperating with the Muslim nations and with the Muslim American community They're on the front lines. They can provide information to us that we might not get anywhere else. So I was born in Iraq. I moved to Canada 30 years ago. I've been Muslim ever since. I've been active in the Muslim community as well as the video game community since I started working in the industry. I have never met a terrorist. I'm not privy to any information. I don't know how to be your ally in this fight. This is a tweet that went viral by a person who goes by the name of Cash Ali. I don't understand why non-Muslims think we British Muslims can stop ISIS. Mate, I can't even get a text back from the girl I like. Can you expect me to stop a terrorist organization? For better or worse, these are the things we're dealing with. They're strangely very similar to things that normal people deal with. So, you don't need us to be your allies. We need you to be ours. In the movie Three Kings, there was a very troubling scene where a Muslim woman was shot point blank by an insurgent. And the reason that this scene exists is to drum up support for the noble American soldiers who are there to stop the insurgency. This is not necessarily entirely false, because 97% of the world's victims of terrorism are Muslim. Look it up. Nobody hates terrorists more than us on both fronts. We are the victims in number of deaths, and we are the victims in the number of bigoted acts that happen because we're blamed for our own deaths, and the deaths of others, of course, as a result. So what this does is it makes people think that we have to go and kill Muslims that kill Muslims. And if Muslims die as a result, well, isn't that why we're there to begin with? And it devalues our lives to begin with. It devalues the value of our life. Solely portraying us as victims justifies the wars that make us victims. So this is not good. There's another movie called The Siege in the 90s. It took place before September 11. And in this, there was the terrorist act, and Muslims were the perpetrators. And Muslims were portrayed, the terrorists were portrayed as being very religious. They even linked a lot of our religious acts to the terrorist acts. And there was a CIA agent who was Muslim, but he was one of the good Muslims. And he drank alcohol and he went to parties, and there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is the association that they created in this. Because when you create a direct link between the religion and terrorism, what you're telling us is that we could be Muslim, but not too Muslim. And you're creating that association between our religion and terrorism. Not you personally, just. So some Muslims practice more than others. We can practice Islam on a spectrum, and that's okay. Now to the debunking of some of the misconceptions. Like I said, we could write volumes about what people think Islam is and isn't, but I just picked out a few things. To start, most Muslims come from these countries. Of course, there are Muslims everywhere. I'm from Montreal. There are Muslims here in San Francisco, but it's mostly from here. Fewer than 15% of Muslims are Arab. What I mean by this is that they speak Arabic as their primary language. There are a few more that speak it as their secondary language or it's equal. So it could go up to about 20% depending on how you define what an Arab is. But as primary language, it's about 15%. The biggest Muslim country is Indonesia, a country nobody ever hears anything about. And that might have something to do with them not having oil, just saying. Indonesia is a peaceful country, it doesn't get involved in anything, and it is the biggest Muslim country in the world. The second biggest Muslim population is in India, where they're actually a minority. And there are almost as many Muslims in India as there are Muslims who are primarily Arab. And yet they get very little representation. When was the last time you saw an Indonesian character in anything? I can't name one. Well, I can name one, but that's because I did research, it's different. So what do Muslims look like? I'll give you a little bit of time to think about it. Okay, before I answer that question, what does a Christian look like? What does an atheist look like? Most of you, I bet, when I asked you what a Muslim looks like, you conjured up an image in your mind. But it was much harder, or maybe even impossible, to do the same for Christians and atheists. And why is this? It's because you have a bigger pool to draw on where you live right now for Christians and atheists. And so the stereotypes don't make sense. If you ask this question in a Muslim country, it would be the inverse. They wouldn't know what a Muslim looks like. What are you talking about? Like, anyone's Muslim, everyone's Muslim. But they would have the Hollywood hero as either the Christian or the atheist. And that's how, because that's what they see, the hero. Most people here have a very skewed image of what a Muslim looks like. Depending on a few variations, it might be these two with varying degrees of dress. And if you were a little more well-traveled, it might be a little bit more diverse. But the truth is, the spectrum is very, very wide, and a Muslim can look like anyone, right? And the more Muslims you meet, the more this is a no-brainer. So I don't know who you are, but you might have imagined something along these lines, and that's okay. So let's play a game. I'm a game designer, I like games. I call it 50 Shades of Brown. I'm going to show you an image, and if you think this person is not Muslim, raise your hand. Don't overthink it, I want your first impulse. Deal? About half of you. Sikh. About half of you. Hindu. Okay, some hesitation, but not many people at all. Christian. Syrian Christian. You see the cross? A lot of you. Ethiopian Jew. Buddhist. It's interesting, like you're about halfway for most of them. The Buddhists stumped almost everyone because nobody knows that Buddhists can dress this way. The truth is, you're not far from being right, regardless of what you said, because all of these people come from countries that have large populations of Muslim. And culture generally dictates dress way more than religion. Christian Arabs in certain places are indistinguishable from Muslim Arabs. You cannot tell them apart. In certain places, again, because culture works that way. So, Muslims wear turbans. Muslims wear saris, Muslims cover their heads. It just, in the details that sometimes you could tell what's different and what's not. So keep that in mind. We are diverse, just like everyone else. Now I'm going to get to the how-to guide. So if you want to represent Muslims in your games, and I hope that's why you're here, these are a few pointers. The first is, if you have a platform, give it to us. This is Kamala Khan. She's Mrs. Marvel. She is a character from comics, not from, because there's very little positive representation of Muslim in video games. I apologize, that's why I'm drawing from so many media. Kamala Khan is Pakistani, she's a teenager and she's a Muslim. And her comics speak to my experience growing up in the West more than any other character in fiction I've ever seen. Even though I'm not Pakistani and I'm not a woman, I'm no longer a teenager. Why is that? It's because it's authentic. Because it was written by two Muslim women, G. Willow Wilson and Sana Amanat. In fact, when they first started writing the book, they only had the story for about 3 comics. They didn't expect this to be the great success that it was. And then it is. It's still printed now, and it's a big deal, and people love it. Why is that? It's because there's no competition. We want this, and nobody's giving it to us. So whatever form we get it, it's good at this point. Later on, we'll see. So if you want to be in the front, you want to represent us now. So if you have a platform, give it to us. And you need to amplify, we need you to amplify our voices. The next step is to talk to us. So let's say, for example, you don't have a platform, but you do have a game, and there are Muslims among you, either as your friends or as your coworkers, then come and ask us questions. What I find is a lot of people are afraid to offend us, so they don't ask, and they misrepresent us, which is far more offensive. And what happens is, if you ask us even an offensive question and we answer it once, you'll never offend us that way again. But if you offend us in a video game, it's kind of permanent, all right? So we'll take it. Just come and talk to us. And everyone might have different questions, and that's totally okay. As I proved before, Islam is very diverse, and it doesn't matter. As long as you have a consultant that's Muslim, it'll go. Don't stack tokens. And there's a lot I could say about this. So what I mean to say is that right now there's a need and a desire to represent people, to have diversity in our games, which is great. And we're seeing how that's a very good thing. However, if you have a character, let's say, who's a black Muslim amputee woman, sounds like a great character. But if everyone else in your game is a white guy, you're not doing anyone any favors. And that character, even though it sounds like an interesting character, I would love to know what they have to go through. If you don't have a consultant that could speak to their actual experience, that's dangerous as well. It's not going to come off as being authentic. And sometimes you cannot find a consultant that has that experience, so then no problem. Get consultants who are from all these different marginalized groups. And in addition to this, spread out the diversity among your cast. You'll see it's going to be a lot better. There are a lot of games right now that are more successful because of it. So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying don't make characters that are from different marginalized groups. I'm saying don't stack tokens. It's not a checklist that you could do all with one character. Insist on authentic VOs. So for better or worse, when I was young, I loved Aladdin because there were not a lot of different ways that Arabs were represented in video games at all. I am Arab. And Aladdin could have been about Muslims. They say Allah, Allah, etc. So I didn't know any better, and I loved it as a result. Today, I have a different opinion about Aladdin, but I won't go into that. So the one thing that even as a child that I did notice is Aladdin did not sound like me. And that is something that could have been easily addressed. This is Anna Mari. Her voice actress is in Egypt. And I was told by some Egyptian friends that if you are Egyptian, you know exactly what part of Egypt she's from. It's that authentic. And on top of that, what's amazing is she's actually about the right age for the character that she's playing, which is really unique, sadly, in our industry. So when Anna speaks, you will never mistake her for another character. It's impossible. Isn't that awesome? That's amazing. Even for gameplay reasons, that's amazing. So insist on authentic VOs. If you have a roster, include us. Now, these characters might not even be Muslim, and it doesn't matter. They come from Muslim majority countries, and that's what's important. If you don't point out the religion of any other characters, then do the same for the Muslims. You don't have to have a banner on their front that says Muslim, Muslim, Muslim. We don't need that. That's not important. What's important is that you represent people from where we come from. Hakan might not be Muslim, but he's from Turkey, and we don't have a lot of characters that come from Turkey. And the same is true for all of these characters. So if you have a roster, please include people from our countries. So you need to include us. If you have NPCs, please have Muslim NPCs. And don't make Islam their focal point. So this is Farida Malik from the Deus Ex series. She's a badass who happens to be Muslim, which is amazing. Sarah Hasmadi is a brilliant scientist who happens to be Muslim. And Islam is mentioned, which is amazing because what this does is it normalizes us. We can be something other than the Muslim character. We're a character that's also Muslim. There are very few characters that are like that. And we are normal, as I've shown you with different slides before. So we need your help into pushing that to other people so they can see us as normal as well. We have other interests and other aspects of our personality other than just being Muslim. This is a movie called Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves from the 90s. Actually, Azim is a pretty good character, especially from the 90s when it comes to Muslim representation, because he's nuanced. He's not a pillar of virtue who's perfect in every way. That's not the only kind of Muslim representation I'm asking for. It would be great if at least one of the characters was like that, but it doesn't have to be that. He's nuanced. He was an exile, and it's ambiguous as to why, but he has a moral code, and he calls everyone Christian. So it's like there's this level of, okay, he seems like he could be real, and this takes place in the Crusades. Everything felt good, and I love that they had this character who was not portrayed in just a negative light, where he was balanced. And then he bowed down to pray, and I didn't recognize what he was doing. Our rituals are precise. My friends from First Nations have the exact same comment. If you're not going to do the research and hire a consultant, then just don't include the ritual. It's an easy shortcut. Alternate skins are great, and they mean a lot. So this is Farah, and very recently she had a hijab skin that actually had a lot of research that went to do it because it looks like a Bedouin hijab from Egypt, specifically. It's an option, so if people don't want to wear it, no problem. And if people do, they will, and it will mean a lot to them. Exhibit A. This is Jasmine Loves You, although this was during Halloween, so her name was Jasmine Kills You. Farah is wearing a hijab. I'm Muslim. You don't know how much this means to me. I've been waiting all my life. I've been waiting all my life too. We've all been waiting all our lives to be included. What's interesting is if you look at her Twitter avatar, her icon, it's a beaten but victorious Kamala Khan, because Muslims will Absorb all media that represent us because there's so little of it. So it is meaningful and you will find success. Now, if you are representing people from specific countries, do your research. Just what even if you think you're well-traveled and well-versed, we're not all the same. And even something as simple as a head covering has extremely different manifestations based on where the people come from. So just hire a consultant, do some research, and no problem, include us. But if we're talking about character customization, then go crazy. Because as long as you don't say this is an Indonesian headdress, or this is from Somalia, then go crazy. Any kind of headdress. It's an option. Anyone can wear it of any gender, and there's not a problem. We appreciate these options. A lot of games are going this route, and it's great. So just have fun with it. So can anyone tell me what country this takes place in? Again, I'm not shaming the people who worked on this game. This screenshot could have been taken from a lot of different games. I had to choose one. Maybe? I call it Arabistan. It's a generic, war-torn, Middle Eastern, Southeast Asian, broken down rubble place where many of our FPS matches take place. The problem here is that we see this and we think, no, I'm not pointing out, we think Iraq. When most of Iraq does not look like this. Even war-torn Iraq, most of it does not look like this. And for sure, if you go back 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, most of the Middle East did not look like this. But this is all we recognize. It desensitizes us to, we don't even know what the reality of these countries look like. Again, I'm sorry, I'm not pointing anyone out. This is Syria before and after the war. And sadly, the before is the one we don't recognize. And when we see it in the news, oh, I fought a match in that location. And if a stray bullet hits someone, well, whatever, I'm aiming for people there all the time anyway. It completely dehumanizes us. This is a tweet from my friend Nicolas Barria. He was talking about it, Oasis, which is a map from Blizzard, from Overwatch, that was set in a future Iraq. And it glorifies the Middle East instead of the usual depictions. He showed it to his Iraqi-Canadian friend, and it brought his friend to tears at work. And if it's not clear who that friend is, it was me. And the reason this was meaningful is because I spent a lot of time thinking about this and talking about this and writing about this. And never once, I'm from Iraq, never once did I project a bright future for my own country. And to see someone else do it, it was, sorry. I'm sorry. I hope you realize how meaningful this is. I needed it, thank you.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Boomer, hug you. I hope this proves a point that this is actually very meaningful and it touches people in a positive way. Things have been getting better. I've been in the video game industry about 10 years now, and things have been getting a lot better. But we're not there, we're not where we want to be. And Muslims, all we want is just to be included in this conversation. That's really all I had to say. Thank you. Okay, so we have 6 minutes for questions if anybody wants to ask anything.
Do you have any suggestions for movies to watch for ideas?
Movies to watch for ideas is a very good question. I would say, okay, so he's asking if there are any good movies, I guess, that represent Muslims positively. The first one that comes to mind is Pitch Black. In it, there are Muslims who just happen to be there in the future, who have nothing to do with the violence that's happening there. Oh, this is not working? Did everyone hear me anyway, or do I have to repeat it? So pitch black is one, but to be honest, I can't really think of anything right now. But if you want, poke me and I'll make you a list. Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
I've worked on a bunch of big Japanese AAA games, and the problem that I've always found when we were doing localization to English is that our actual actor pool is all dudes from California
Yeah.
who like have that accent, and we're like, well, how about this character? Like he's like Muslim, and they're like, well, how about we use the guy who played whoever in Dragon Ball? And we're like, oh no.
Do you
so
use
like,
actors?
Huh? Oh.
Because I could connect you to a person who could find you diverse people.
Yeah, basically, what I'd like to ask is, how do I find, Muslim actors
Yes.
and who are both, are both union and non-union, and how can I just would like to know so I can pass that on to people who are still doing that kind
Absolutely. Well, my friend Lily, she works in Montreal, and she actually, it's not just Muslims or people from Muslim countries that she has a pool of names, but if anyone wants to have actors from there, come see me, poke me, and I'll connect you to her. She does have a pool of both of unionized and non-unionized voice actors. So, oops. So yeah.
Awesome,
Thank you. Anyone else? Hi.
Hi, wish she was there.
Oh,
first.
sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. This is also an actor question. It's two-part. When you are searching for actors, I know that you're not allowed to say they must be from. We have laws against that. So do you find that there are certain ways around that? Or is it best done by, I know this person who has people?
Yes, that's what I would do because
Okay.
I don't want to do anything illegal. So I'm not a lawyer, and I'm sorry, even lawyers don't give this kind of advice.
Right.
So I would just connect you to the people who have this pool, and if you tell them what you need, they can find someone for you. I'm
Great.
sorry if that didn't answer your question.
No,
Did you
no,
have a
you're
follow-up?
fine. You're fine. Yes. So, and my next question is, how specific do you suggest? Say, you have a Muslim character that you haven't given a huge background. Nobody has a huge background in this. Do you suggest finding someone with very specific, like, in neighborhoods in a certain town? Like, do you have anything like
It's not necessary.
that? No.
There's a game I was playing on the plane right here. I think it's called Good Pizza, something along those lines. And I was making a pizza, and a seemingly Muslim woman with hijab walked in. I know nothing about her or where she's from or anything along those lines, and that's totally okay. If you're gonna put other labels on top of it, then you have to do the research to make sure that whatever you're saying about this person is accurate. But if it's just a person who happens to wear a veil, go for it. There's really no problem whatsoever. The people can fill in the blanks themselves. There are people who are not Muslims who wear veils, so no problem. That's just an example of the veil. We could talk about like a dark-skinned person with a big beard, and he happens to be in a Guitar Hero type game. That's totally okay. We don't need to say he's from this country or that. But try to treat them at the same level as everyone else on the roster. So if everyone else on the roster has a backstory, then you probably need a backstory. If you're mentioning their country of origin, and if you're mentioning the other things that they're interested in, then you would need someone like to speak to that.
Great.
Is that
Thank
fair?
you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, how are you?
Amazing. How you doing?
Good. So a lot of the customization these days, especially on live game, goes through microtransaction.
Yes.
Do you think it would be still
I see where
okay to have, for example, women headwear in microtransaction customization, like all the other headwear a game has?
That is
But
a
because
loaded
there is,
question.
yes, there is a cultural part, but there's also a religious part
Yeah.
to it. So I don't know how can we monetize something that has a religious connotation to it?
That's a very difficult question to
know.
answer. I would say
Because, for example, if you're in a game and you want to offer more customization, but most of your customization goes through microtransaction,
it's more of a PR question than everything else. It depends how you formulate it. If you say, we need the budget to make this, and so far we're transferring the cost to you if you want your representation, it might fly. But otherwise, if you're representing everyone else for free, then we
No.
should... Okay. So if
That makes
all
free.
other customization options are also charged,
Oh, yeah.
then no problems.
Yeah, everything's charged.
Like, does that make
That's
sense?
not true. Sorry.
No,
But
I'm just
no, but if
clarifying.
all your customization is on the same level, would
Then
it be
there's
okay
no
to
problem.
include something that has more?
We want you to normalize us. If everyone else is the same, we want to be the same as everyone else. All right? Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a good question. I don't know who was here first. Go ahead.
So it's clearly given that players like to see themselves represented in games, especially in their player characters. It's super important. What advice do you have for people doing like far modern sci-fi games or fantasy games or alternate universe games to let the players still feel like they see themselves in the game, but maybe are current Earth religions don't exist?
Yeah, well, Star Trek does a great job of that. So follow them as a good example. One thing to stay away from is don't create a race that's a caricature of a culture that exists in real life. That's not the right way to go. But if you're having people who, if in your fiction, Islam doesn't exist anymore and no other religion exists, or even if another religion survived and it didn't, that's not a problem at all. So you could represent people who evolved from those countries and just tell the story of what happened to them. It's fiction, right?
If you wanted to include like a character that looks like they're in hijab, even though you don't have Islam in your game or in your universe.
That's okay as long as you have a good reason for why the hijab persisted afterwards and you've given it some thought. Because that doesn't become Muslim representation, it's Muslim symbolism at that point. So if you need Muslim symbolism and you have a good reason for it, go for it. There are a lot of sci-fi authors that are Muslim who write about similar situations. So maybe asking them and consulting with them about what they learned and what they did would be great. There's a few, the names don't come to mind, but I could maybe give you a few. I think Saladin was the name of one of them who writes sci-fi. Yeah, so he'd be a great person to ask specifically for that. But this is my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Great presentation, great talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
My perspective is different because I don't directly make content, but I think if we're going to make more representative games, we have to have more representation in the industry in general. So from a work environment perspective, what do you think would be the most impactful change that you would see like at a studio in terms of work environment?
Well, hire more Muslims.
Well, yeah.
And a good way to do that
say,
organically and naturally is maybe don't show the names on the CVs when you're going through the hiring process until the interview.
Yeah.
It's going to be a happy surprise.
Yeah.
More Muslims will make it to video games, and then you'll have consultants out of the pool of people that you work with.
Right.
And everything else is going to come organically from that.
Beyond recruiting though, like at work as an environment, what would be the most impactful changes? Like if you're thinking about a place that's going to make it more comfortable and more inclusive for people.
Like specifically accommodating Muslims? Okay.
Or people in general, I mean, I think.
That's a great question. I could actually give a completely different talk on just that.
Yeah, I know it's kind of
but
like
a clean place to pray would be amazing. It doesn't have to be big, but a clean place to pray would be amazing. If you have a lot of activities, networking activities that revolve around alcohol, having a few that don't would be great. Tea socials, ice cream socials. Muslims love ice cream. And generally accommodating, like right now it's gotten much better. When I started in the industry, there were rarely any vegetarian or vegan options. So Muslims who keep to halal can have vegetarian and vegan food and they love it. So, but now that already seems to be taken care of. So I'll mention it anyway, just in case you don't have any. I don't know how you would not have vegetarians in your workforce, but just in case. But that's taken care of. These little things go a long way because at the end, Muslims will tell you when they need something, right? I mean, there's also the Friday prayer that some Muslims go to. If you give them a slot where they could work later on Fridays and have a longer lunch. Anything like that goes a long way. All right. Sorry. I'm new to this. Forgive me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. Last question, I think. Is that the last one, or do you have time for more? Who am I looking at? Okay, nobody seems to know. I'll keep going until they kick us out. Go for it.
I want to say thank you first as an Egyptian Muslim myself. A lot of this hit very close to home. I've often found myself talking to folks who think that as far as protagonists go, that it has to sort of always be a cis white man, and that we need an excuse for it to be anyone else, and that they throw out this garbage idea of gender diversity for diversity's sake. What do you think needs to be done, or what do you tell those people? What do you think conversations need to be happened for people to be trained out of that idea?
Maybe what would be great if there are any journalists here, if someone does choose a white cis male as a main protagonist, start asking them why. That could be a good first step.
Okay.
But otherwise, to be honest, I don't have an answer to that. This is something that's, you could write volumes on it, right? I mean, this is seen as the norm, and that's why bigotry exists. How do we tackle bigotry? It's so above what I could answer in this talk, but I would love to have that answer. So if anyone else gives it to you, please reach out and let me know.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. We're still not kicked out, so we're over by what, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
5 minutes, okay.
That's fine. So when you're looking for consultants, being a consultant can often be a big form of emotional labor, particularly when you are already a minority in your particular group. Do you have good strategies for asking people hey, do you want to consult without forcing that on them if they don't want to? What's a good inline for hey, you want to consult on this?
I'm actually working to start up a SIG with IGDA for Muslims in games right now. We're still in the beginning steps, but we want to be able to answer these kind of questions by having a pool of people that you could ask, both paid consultants for the companies that could afford it and volunteers for the ones that don't. We haven't established what the rule set is. We don't, this is still the infancy and the beginning of being able to answer that question, but it is something that we, some of our members did bring up and that we do want to address, because it's taxing, right? But eventually, from what I heard from consultants who consult for other things, especially for First Nations and the like, is that the people who do this as a job, they do develop some kind of, what's the word to use? They're able to cope with it better because they've done it so much for so many different studios that they have answers to that, and they're able to separate their emotion from the consulting work. So I'm hoping that's going to happen for us. As far as I know, there are no Muslim consultants for video games or for media in general. I could be wrong. I looked for them and I could not find them. So we're trying to establish that ourselves, and then we'll see when the problems arise, we'll try to tackle it. But thank you, that's a good question. So, oh, hi. Squeezed in right at the end.
What is the difference between representation and cultural appropriation? I mean, where is the line that separates representation from cultural appropriation?
Cultural education, okay. What I would...
Appropriation.
Appropriation, I heard completely wrong. Okay, well, in this case, we're talking about video games specifically, right? So if you're talking about a character who you're saying this person is a Muslim, then that is representation, or someone who comes from a Muslim country. If you're talking about a character who appears to be Muslim, but you explicitly go out of your way to say that they're not, then that would be cultural appropriation. However, I've never seen that before, not in video games or any other media, not for Muslims specifically, because to be quite honest, there's a lot of bigotry that's going against Muslims right now. The only thing that's close is I see there's a huge trend for hummus right now, so maybe that has something to do with it, where people are making all their different brands of hummus, but I know that's not what you're asking. But still, that was what I would say. If you have a character who appears to be Muslim, but you explicitly go out of your way to say they're not, you better have a pretty good reason why that is. That's good? Yes?
A little announcement. We are sadly out of time, but if anyone still has any further questions, we can take this conversation over to the overlooks over there in room 2022 and 2024. Anyone is fine. They have tables, chairs. We can have a nice conversation, and you have been incredibly amazing.
Thank you very much.